Welcome to a special edition, a Thursday edition of the CK Podcast. I'm your host, Leo Biaz, and today we're also with our co-host, Ty, my brother. I almost named one of my new Tangs after you because he has like that Thai tea orangish, like milky tone to his skin. I'm like, you know what? I might call him Ty, but you know what? I'm gonna call him Thunder because that's what Ty brings. You bringing thunder to the show, brother. How you doing, man?
Thank you, man. I appreciate that, man. Thai tea, Titanic, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Tiger Woods, call it what you want, man. But I'm super excited today, man. Definitely taking the threshold in terms of talking about the topics today, man. I think one of our biggest topics is going to be one of the reasons why you should not trade for Russell Westbrook with the
Okay.
capital ALOT,
Thank
because
you.
there
Thank
are
you.
a lot of people interested in him, but I don't know about that. But with that being said, man, I think just to kind of like start things off, I kind of want to talk about some upcoming key dates for the NBA. So for people who are unfamiliar, November 18th is going to be the NBA draft. We just found out recently that only 2 days after that is going to be a NBA free agency opening, which is super exciting. December 1st is going to be the opening of training camp. And then December 22nd, boom, here we go, the start of the NBA season. But with
We
that being said, I think the main topic of this show, Russell Westbrook Russell Westbrook requests a trade from the Houston Rockets. I think some people expected it, some people didn't. He said he kind of came out and said he wanted to return back to that floor general role that he was with OKC. What are your thoughts on that, Leo, and even potential landing destinations for him?
Well, he's definitely not going to get that here in Sacramento. A lot of Kings fans, an abundance of Kings fans, keep asking me, sending me stuff. Can we get Russell Westbrook? He makes so much sense. Him and De'Aaron will do this, we'll do that. And I'm like, are you serious? Except for one person, which is my boy from the Kings Wolf Den, man. Um, it's tough to really trash on an all-star player, but at 32 years old, with his career going pretty much down, right? It's at the tail end of his career. He's been banged up. He came off an injury during the playoffs, and he didn't look very sharp. He was playing very well pre-injury, pre-COVID. I'll give him that, but he doesn't really help this current Kings team. It's going to be interesting to see what team he helps out. Maybe the Knicks want to get into the sweepstakes just because he's the name, right? A Russell Westbrook type name. Again, for the teams that trade for him, they're getting the name. They're not getting prime time Russell Westbrook. And I want to make that very clear. I'm not saying he's not a good player. Even till this day, he's a very good player. But fit has to be a major concern if you do indeed trade for him. Now, the Hornets are another team. Michael Jordan connection. It makes perfect sense. One of his favorite players of all time. He says he reminds him of him, I think, or how he played with that tenacity. So you see the Jordan brand connection there, and that makes sense. Like the Hornets won't attract anybody, so they may give up some future assets. If I'm the Kings, I don't give up future assets for a 32-year-old downhill Russell Westbrook who can't shoot the ball, who would be an awful fit next to De'Aaron Fox. So I'm sure we'll expand into that more, but but those are my initial thoughts, bro.
Yeah, I completely agree. When you look at Russell Westbrook and his performance, especially last season, it was very like underperforming. And so ultimately, when you look at the bigger picture, especially for Sacramento, whether we are in a rebuild situation or not, we do not need an aging superstar that is past his prime. And so while although I don't want to undermine everything that Russell Westbrook has accomplished, especially averaging a triple double and being a former MVP at this point in his career, especially alongside James Harden, he wasn't able to get the job done. And even if we look back to his earlier years with OKC. I mean, we don't have a Kevin Durant and James Harden, a young Kevin Durant and James Harden on a roster, and they still couldn't get the job done. So ultimately, I don't want to see another, I guess, early playoff exit if we were to acquire Russell Westbrook. I just don't think it's reasonable to give up future assets for, just like you mentioned, an aging superstar. But with that being said, I mean, he is a big name, and so if you do want to get tickets, but I guess there aren't even going to be tickets next season. I guess hype for your team, go all for it. But at the end of the day, man, I think you're just going to see another Houston Russell Westbrook, and I think the general consensus for most NBA fans is you can't win an NBA championship with Russell Westbrook as your best player. And some people would even argue you
Facts.
can't even win a first round with Russell Westbrook as your best player. But yeah, with that
Facts.
being said,
You
man,
can't
I
win
think
with him as your second best player either, and I'm gonna say that on record now. He needs to be your third best player for you guys to win a championship. And going back to him, my biggest criticism is he just becomes this black hole in the playoffs. Yes, he puts up stats, But if you attempt 25 to 30 shots, I hope you can put up 20 points. And that's been the consensus for Russell Westbrook for such a long time. And people are like, oh, Leo, you're a hater. You're this. I said, no, I respect his grind, his tenacity, the way he plays the game, which is the right way. That's how you should play the game. That's how you should approach this game, with love and respect. And that's what he does, because he gives it his all. Make no mistake about it. I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying, at this point, if you're the Kings or if you're a young aspiring team, you don't give up future assets for a guy who's aging. With De'Aaron Fox, let's get into it now. They both really can't. For a fact, Russell can't shoot. De'Aaron is improving in that direction. How will it really work if he's looking to be the primary guy once again? Are you going to move De'Aaron to the 2? Does that make any sense? Again, think about when you guys are like, oh, they're going to be such a dynamic duo. I don't know, because if I'm opposing teams, I play off these guys. Now your pick and roll is ineffective because they're saying shoot the ball. I dare you to. Now, Rashawn Holmes won't be as effective as he was. Or even the potential Bagley if he finally hones down and he understands his role on this team. So you're affecting a lot of things for maybe a triple-double a game, which if it doesn't lead to wins, then what are you really doing? Now with Michael Jordan, again, with the Nets, there was somebody on Basketball Zone who proposed this, Akash Verma. So shout out to him. He sent me a bunch of trades, but we'll highlight this one right now. It's Russell Westbrook, Daniel House to the Hornets for Batum, Biyombo, Devontae Graham, a first-round pick in 2022, a first-round pick in 2023. Unprotected. Go.
Man, I think if you look at that trade, although Charlotte is unloading the contract with Batum, they're giving up a lot. 2 first-round draft picks and
And
a
Graham?
Devontae Graham
Yeah.
that played so well last year and was, essentially played better than Terry Rozier, especially as a guy. I think he went in the second round, right? So I don't know. I don't love that for Charlotte. I know there's been a lot of reports coming out that that is a high possible trade destination for Russell Westbrook. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at Charlotte and the way that their roster is kind of like made up, I don't think that Russell Westbrook really makes sense, especially if he wants to return to that floor general role. I mean, you have nice young pieces in PJ Washington and Miles Bridges, but for me, man, I feel like I'm gonna keep on saying this. You don't want an aging superstar on your team. But with that being said, I want to preface that like by saying that I think Russell Westbrook is a phenomenal basketball player. I
Yeah.
think he's very athletic. I think just like you mentioned, he plays with 110% effort. But I think that goes like for better and for worse, because sometimes he gets that tunnel vision, and just like you mentioned before as well, he's sometimes a black hole. Well, I don't know. Some people would argue he's a black hole on offense a lot of the time. So
A
I
lot
don't
of
know.
the time. Don't sugarcoat it. He's a black hole a lot of the time.
Yeah. And so I think with young guys on the team, especially if you letting them develop and get, a good amount of shots, I don't know if you want Russell Westbrook, going in there and messing up the chemistry. So I know, yeah, a lot of people are saying that he might go to Charlotte. What are your thoughts on that, Leo?
Again, the connection is there. We know how highly Michael Jordan thinks of him, but God, you're giving up 2 first-round picks, and if they're if they're top 5 protected, maybe. But again, as you said, they're still giving up a lot. But for that city, that organization, that could revitalize some of the fan base, but this is the worst season for them or the Kings or any small market team to do something like this, because there probably won't be any fans. So let's take that into consideration. You make this big move, you pay this dude 30 to $40 million a year to not have fans. And that obviously that's part of your salary cap. So I'm not making that big of a huge deal, but I'm just saying, if you make this type of move, you're making it because you want people in seats. And unfortunately, as the Lakers announced yesterday, they're for sure not having fans until further notice. And we still have yet to hear about other teams, but it's concerning. And again, if the Kings have to give up 2 first round or even 1 first round pick or even this year's top 12 pick, say give up Buddy, Kojo, this year's pick. I mean, it's not a terrible thing. Again, I'm not saying he's not a good player, man. He just doesn't fit. You know what I'm saying? Like, he just doesn't
Yeah,
fit,
no,
period.
definitely. Like, what's the realistic ceiling for a Russell Westbrook in a Kings jersey, right? Like, it's gonna
Right.
be probably. I mean, I don't know, especially in the West too. It's gonna be difficult, but especially with Golden State, I'm assuming that they make the playoffs and get a higher seed. I mean, if we could sneak into 8 or 7, I mean, that's that. And like we know how Russell Westbrook performs in the playoffs, so I don't know why you would want that in
If they make
Sacramento.
the playoffs, that's a win. That's a success. Unfortunately, I don't think they'll make the playoffs with him because
Hey,
he's not
hey,
because he's not that Russell Westbrook anymore. He's just aging Russ where who knows if again the Kings would have zero air for slacking off. Like, can you depend on a 32-year-old Russell Westbrook who's had a lot of issues with his quad, with other parts of his body, to really play 72 games during the pandemic on a team with no air, okay? With no air. Because you essentially be losing Buddy Hield, so that's your 20-point score. It's tough for me to even say they'd make the playoffs, man. Now, if you give me a Victor Oladipo with some of the same surrounding pieces, a healthier Oladipo, maybe I would prefer that and take a risk on him. Obviously, he's what, 29, 28, something like that. I'm taking the risk on a guy who's roughly about 4 years younger. And again, he has like capabilities of being an all NBA guy. He's done it before. So that's a risk that I'll be willing to take because he can fit a lot better with a guy like De'Aaron Fox rather than a guy that just like De'Aaron Fox, right? Where, we understand Fox looked up to him or looks up to him. And again, they're two similar of players and it just doesn't make sense from a cohesive standpoint. He would make you better on the fact that he's a better player. But how far can you get in a competitive West? I don't think very far.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. But I think with that being said, we're talking about that Houston Rockets talk. Harden publicly came out and said that he's all in on the Rockets. He definitely wants to, stay in that organization. But I've also heard reports that privately he's talked to some of his like closer associates. And if the Rockets want to blow it up, obviously Harden doesn't want to be there. And some possible trade destinations that I've heard is Brooklyn, Miami, and Philadelphia. So what are your thoughts on that, James Harden? Could what are your thoughts on that, Leo? What do you think James Harden can provide to a playoff contending team that's not his own technically?
If he goes to the Sixers, that's a great fit with Joel Embiid. They would have to give up Ben Simmons, which again would be a fresh start for him in Houston. I would do that. Honestly, if I'm Houston and you don't want to play the same type of style, make that move, get future assets with the Ben Simmons, with maybe somebody else. That makes perfect sense. And it makes sense for the Sixers too. It's a Morey type deal. He makes a splash in year one to win. Ben Simmons, man, he's really good. People sleep on him. Like, he's really good. I know he can't shoot, but he does everything else so well. So I like that move to Philadelphia. You said the other one was what?
Brooklyn and Miami.
No in Brooklyn. Like, no, hell no in Brooklyn. It makes no sense. And Miami, oof. So you'd give up what? Hero, Doa Duncan, future assets. That's tough. Like,
Yeah,
like I'd rather have Ben Simmons and Tyler Hero if I'm the Rockets.
yeah,
So, uh, it's tough. I mean, I think he'd be a nice fit there. It just depends on what you give up as well. But I like it. Yeah, I mean, James Harden will make anybody better. Period. He's a great basketball player, but who is the number one? Would he be the number two? So you'd have what? Bam, Harden, and Jimmy. Yeah, I mean that's actually a really good fit, actually. But are you giving up Bam or are you giving up Hero? Because the Rockets are going to demand a lot for James Harden, and rightfully so. He's arguably a top five player in the league.
yeah, definitely. I think I want to pose the question now. Do you think Harden can continue this ISO ball play style, or do you think he's going to have to definitely conform kind of like the way he plays and kind of like play more in a team system off the ball?
He's going to have to change his ways if he's not the primary option anymore. I don't see how teams continue to play his brand of basketball. Not to say that he can't play the other way because he can. He's a savant of a basketball mind on the floor. He's three steps ahead of everybody else. So Would it take an adjustment period? Of course it would. But it's nothing new to him. That's how he used to play. And he was effective even with OKC. So, and even in college, well, in college he was way more, he was more on the ball as well. But he is more than capable of playing off the ball, cutting more. But he's at his best when he has the ball in his hands. So make no mistake about that.
Definitely, I completely agree. I think with that being said, I saw like a social media post. It was like a crazy stat. I think it was the year right before Chris Paul was traded in Houston. It said that when Clint Capella, James Harden, and Chris Paul played together on the floor, they were like 50-2. So I think considering kind of like where he would be at in Philadelphia, kind of playing alongside Joel Embiid, we could definitely see a lot of pick and roll action. And I wouldn't be surprised if they see success with James Harden and Joel Embiid. Um, our next trade topic. This is a guy that was able to resurrect an Oklahoma City organization that nobody expected to make the playoffs, and there has been a lot of whispers that he may potentially end up in Phoenix. What are your thoughts on that?
I like the fit with Devin Booker. He is, we all know, I love Chris Paul. He is a little crybaby, but he's, again, a savant on the floor, the best point guard of my generation without question. Steph Curry is a new generation. Steph Curry is a better player. He'll end up being a better point guard. But I'm saying early 2000s, Chris Paul. Chris Paul played at an All NBA level last year. He went on this extreme diet of I think he went green, so he wasn't eating meats, I believe. He just changed his life, man. He got so skinny, so in such good shape. We saw what he did in OKC. He can do it again with any team. Both you and I have said the Bucks, the Lakers, even the Clippers, maybe. Can you imagine Paul George, Chris Paul, and Kawhi Leonard? That would be a phenomenal trio. It just depends because he has a hefty contract. Are they willing to match other salaries to match that? And then would it be enough for the Thunder to say, you know what? I'll do it. I'll get future assets. The Thunder have a lot of toys to play with. I mean, they have a bunch of picks. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Are they saying, okay, we'll retool and still be a playoff team? Let's put this out there, okay? Let's not forget about this. They are a playoff team. They are a very good basketball team. Maybe they just want to retool, flipping for another good player because they have enough assets already. So those are all things to think about, especially for Kings fans or Suns fans who are battling to get into the playoffs. The Warriors are coming back, and they for sure making the playoffs. So
Yeah.
who's coming out? You know what I'm saying?
No, I completely agree, dude. Like when you put CP on that Phoenix roster, I mean, arguably he has a better supporting cast than OKC in terms of like making the playoffs and things like that. So it's just kind of hard because especially with teams like Phoenix and Sacramento, where we're kind of like hoping that we can make the playoffs. Realistically, it's looking like a first round exit for us, but I think it's a good step in the right direction. I saw like a TikTok about kind of like what Phoenix would have to give up in order to acquire CP. It would
Mm-hmm.
probably require Ricky Rubio, Kelly Oubre, maybe even one of their young players, and probably a protected first round pick. And I think with that, if you're looking at OKC's perspective, it's like, are these guys that I'm getting in return worth Chris Paul? Because this guy did a lot more than just, play well on the floor. He was a leader to a lot of the young guys on the team, and he was, a great floor general. So I think that's something that you also have to consider. And although, his trade value went up this offseason, I mean, OKC, I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to bring him back. I mean, I don't know if he'll be a disgruntled superstar and, want to play for a contending team because I think that was his ultimate goal, right? Especially playing OKC for one season to end up playing for a contender. But I mean, from OKC's perspective, he played well. And I mean, if you're able to pair another guy with him this offseason, I would not be surprised at them running it back. Um, but talking about young guys, Anthony Edwards held his pro day about, I want to say, a couple weeks ago. He's actually been receiving a lot of controversy just because of like, I feel like it's kind of like that clutch sports LeBron status, right? Where
Right.
there's always a bunch of cameras and, a lot of publicity. But, some people would argue that any publicity is good publicity. So, I mean, Anthony Edwards said it himself. He's always been in a pandemic, always been in the gym. What are your thoughts on a pro day like that? And do you think it helps or hurts his draft stock?
It helps him a lot. I've always been in the belief that, as I've said, I think the previous show or even the show before that, just like Ben Simmons, they were bored being in college because they understood that they were guaranteed to be a top 3 pick. Ben Simmons was the number 1 pick, and Anthony will probably be the number 1 pick if the Timberwolves keep that spot. So they were on pretty bad teams if you really think about it, because that LSU team was trash and this Georgia Bulldogs team was trash. And I just feel like at some point you just want to get your career started with, and maybe as for Wiseman, that kind of went in his direction where he was like, I'm just going to train for the NBA. Like, let's not sugarcoat the fact that these kids are in school for 6 months and they're pretty much doing halftime stuff. I mean, they're not doing all their work. They're showing up to class maybe. So they're there to play basketball, and they're there to potentially be a top 3 pick in the following draft. So that's how I feel about it. Obviously, if you look at his motor, and there were moments where he was lackadaisical on defense, and people hate watching when guys don't give out efforts. But for his perspective, he's like, man, I'm not going to play this hard for a team that's not very good, risk my chances of being a top 3 pick. I understand both sides of the story. People say, well, Zion Williamson didn't play that way. He was lights out every single game. I get it. Everybody's not Zion Williamson, though. So, with that said, I think that helped him. And if anybody ever questions his talent, is ridiculous, because Anthony Edwards is insane. If he hits, if he ever reaches his upside, watch out NBA. He's arguably a top 10 NBA talent if he ever does reach that potential.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at Anthony Edwards and just like you mentioned, Ben Simmons at LSU, I think it kind of takes a different strategy as kind of like an NBA prospect, right? Because now you're a big fish in a small pond, and you're able to thrive and things like that. I think a prime example of someone who kind of went to a basketball powerhouse and didn't get the limelight that they deserved was Cam Reddish. I think that he's definitely underperformed thus far in
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, but I think ultimately, even if you ask a lot of guys that played against him in high school, people would argue that Cam Reddish was arguably the top prospect coming out of high school that year before he committed to Duke. So I think it was smart for Anthony Edwards. You kind of look at Trae Young, right, in Oklahoma. There's no way that if he goes to a Duke or Kentucky, they allow him to launch those,
Right.
long threes, right? So it was really wise on his part. And kind of get back onto like the his pro day, a lot of agents of like NBA prospects were actually upset that the NBA allows something like this because it gave him so much publicity. And I think nothing really came out about his pro day that was surprising. It wasn't like, oh, he can't shoot, but like we've already talked about, he has great mechanics. But I think ultimately he just showcased what type of player he is. And I think at the end of the day, when you're able to perform under pressure in front of LeBron James and Anthony Davis, it can only help your draft stock. So definitely. With NBA offseason approaching, of course, Giannis has not signed his supermax yet, and it's still looming. Do you think that he could potentially pull a Paul George where he signs, takes the money, and then gets traded in order to kind of have like a win-win for both Milwaukee and himself, or do you think he actually wants to stay?
Facts. That's what we talked about last show, where how can you potentially give up 200 and what, 40 to 80, somewhere in that ballpark, some crazy amount of money. The Bucks are able to offer him the 5th year. Makes complete sense. Play there one more year and then get traded. That to me sounds a lot better for the NBA in general, because if he leaves and says he goes to the Warriors, okay, we all know what's going to happen. It's going to be an unbalanced league again. They're going to win the NBA championship, barring some crazy injuries like they had that last year with KD and Clay. But we all know that if they stay healthy, they're winning the championship. Say he goes to the Heat and they keep their players, the heroes, the butlers, the Bams. You add Giannis to that, they're winning the NBA championship. It's just like, if they don't do it this way, where he signs this year and then they sign and trade him and get assets in return, you're adding an MVP to your already really good team. That would make the league unbalanced, and that's what the NBA doesn't want. And I hope that doesn't happen. Where I hope he does sign this, he plays a following year, so this year and then the next year on his new max deal. And then if it doesn't work out, if he's unhappy, request a trade, And let that team that trades for you give up the house for you, because only then will we continue to have this unbalanced NBA that we love. We really enjoyed watching this last season because it was balanced. We Yes, we knew the Lakers were good, but a lot of us, including myself, thought the Clippers were better. So there wasn't this heavy favorite, or some people thought the Bucks were heavy favorites, and rightfully so. They were the best team during the season. That's what I want to see, is the unpredictability of an NBA season. That's what makes things that's what makes things competitive, and that's what I want. So I hope he takes the money. Then if it doesn't work out, he can request a trade.
Yeah, I think I'm completely on the same boat as you, but I think the awkward situation Giannis is in, and I'm honestly going to say this as a hot take. I don't think Giannis will ever win a championship in Milwaukee. I just
Okay.
feel like they haven't been able to get the pieces around him. And I think even with let's just say they're hypothetically able to acquire CP3, although I think they would be much better, it's hard. Just like we've talked about in the past, the East is top heavy. So although they may definitely be championship contenders, I don't know if that necessarily puts them over the top as if he were to go to a Miami or Golden State. So I think at this point in his career, if he kind of wants to solidify himself, whether it's going to be a KD decision to Golden State or kind of like LeBron to Miami, I think if he really wants to cement his legacy and want to be known as someone that can win, you've got to change it up and go to a different organization. In terms of a sign and trade, I completely agree. I mean, when you look at the teams in the league right now, it's so balanced, and I would hate to see Giannis make Golden State so good again. Although, I am in Bay Area now, so I would love to, see all the hype and success. But at the same time, it's like, dude, that's just not fair anymore.
Yeah.
You arguably pair himself with the two best shooters in the entire NBA. It's
Stop
not.
it.
Yeah, you put them to Miami, like, dude, they literally just went to the finals without you. It's almost like the KD's decision to Golden State, right? Where it's like, man, they won without you. They don't really need you. They knocked you out of the playoffs, right? We've seen that
Right.
before. So with that being said, man, I think Giannis is definitely a phenomenal player. I think he definitely has more developing to do, but back-to-back MVP, that's undeniable, So that's just greatness being available. And so I just mentioned it there, Miami, right? Just coming off of a finals appearance, but I feel like they've gotten no attention in the media. Everyone's talking about Brooklyn, everyone's talking about Golden State. What do you see as a realistic expectation for Miami next year? And like, what do you see next for Miami ultimately?
I think the big cliffhanger for them is Bam Adebayo, who's the best player on that team. Yes, I said that he's the best player on the team, even though Jimmy Butler was the guy who got all the attention. Without Bam Adebayo, none of that happens. Like, he is the staple. As Jimmy said, he's the heart and soul of that team, and he is 20, what, 21, 22.
Something like that, something ridiculous.
So yeah, he's so good already, and he's up. He's his contract's coming up. So do they have a deal under the table where we're like, okay, we'll pay you the following year, or like De'Aaron Fox, because they're from the same class? Do they extend them now and essentially handicap themselves from landing a big star, or is there an agreement and say, okay, we're looking for Giannis, bro, and if we get him, then we'll give both of you the money. But it's like, why aren't you prioritizing me? So I think from that perspective, it's very, very interesting. And I forget who's his agent, but I believe their agents are the same, if I'm not mistaken, which is super interesting to see how that's going to happen. I have to double check on that, but I'm pretty sure it is. And with that said, how do you prioritize your clients? Do you go to bat for Bam this year, knowing that next year as an agent, whoever his agent is, I forget, he's gonna get paid, right? I mean, he's gonna get paid with both guys, but how do you balance that? So going back to the Heat, it's super interesting because their top player is up for an extension. What are they gonna do? Are they gonna wait till he becomes an unrestricted free agent the following year? Because then everybody can throw money at him. So yeah, they're in a tough position, believe it or not, because I know they want Giannis, but at what extent? To give up on Bam? It's
Yeah,
tough.
I mean, exactly what you said. Like, from Bam Adebayo's perspective, I think he obviously loves the culture and the environment in Miami, and I don't think he wants to go anywhere.
Yep.
But he should know his value. And at the end of the day, the NBA is a business, right? So as much as he loves the culture there, he's got to look out for himself. And he was just like you said, arguably the most integral part of that team. And so do you offer Pat Riley kind of like that team discount and say, like, you know what, I can wait till next season in case we get Giannis?
What if
But
he
I
gets
think,
hurt?
yeah. And then if you kind of want to relate that to kind of like, a different sport, Dak Prescott, right, doesn't sign his long-term contract and you don't get that security that you want. I think Bam, especially being a late lottery pick, I don't think a lot of us expected him to, turn out this good, but you want to secure that bag, especially being young in your career. Let's just say, Miami hypothetically isn't able to get the job done for these next 4 or 5 years. Your contract's up, and then you can go to another title contending team. But yeah, I mean, yeah, as Bam Adebayo, you have to know your worth, and I don't know if you should be willing to give Miami that team discount, knowing how well you played in the playoffs.
Going back to that analogy of the Cowboys may very well get the number one pick, and they may very well draft that kid from Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that
Straight.
mean for Dak? That means bye, Dak. Like, you're not getting paid that money. This is a straight ugly business. We all know that. It's business, right? That's what it is. And when you see it from that perspective, from that lens, the way you should think should change. So for Bam, if I'm Bam, I'm saying, show me the money. I took y'all to the finals. I want to get paid. Period.
Yeah, I think, yeah, knock on wood, but barring any injury, if Bam were to suffer some severe injury,
He plays hard.
yeah, it's like it's hard because you want that security, man. And like, although you love the team and you're looking to future assets and things like that, it's like you've got to look out for yourself. And like, in my opinion, if I was Dak Prescott, I would have just sat out. I'm like, we obviously are seeing what Dallas is now without him and how important he is to that team. So like, well, okay, go ahead, I'll sit out. If you don't pay me my money, you guys can continue to lose like you want to lose. So I think that's definitely a interesting thought to talk about. But with that being said, last year we got to see with the technically it's not even last year, probably a couple months ago, we got to see the play-in tournament for the NBA. And I thought that was actually kind of fun. I mean, although it was kind of like sucks because some like teams like Phoenix, right? They got some wins over teams that were just resting their players. But when you talk about like that 8 seed range in terms of Memphis and Portland just playing straight up for that 8 seed, do you think the NBA should bring back the playing tournament?
I loved it. I loved it. I think they should. It'll make things a lot more interesting. It's kind of like that one game we got in baseball where everybody's tuning in because every pitch matters. Just like every single basket will matter. So I love that idea. They should definitely bring it back. I'm all for it, bro. I don't know how you feel about it.
I mean I'm all for that as well, and especially as a Kings fan, that if they let us into like this bubble where 10 and 12, if we're
Right.
in within like 3 games or whatsoever, we're able to get a chance. I mean, it's so exciting, and we get to see especially that last game, right? Memphis versus Portland, and then Phoenix is just sitting there, chewing on their fingernails, hoping that Memphis loses. I mean Portland loses. So I mean, it creates hype. I think it definitely gives the NBA a lot more viewership because it's like, okay, now we're not watching just meaningless games at the end of the season. Like these games actually matter. I think especially for small market teams like a Memphis, Phoenix, or Sacramento, now we're actually excited for something. We're like, oh, we actually got a chance. And I think for other playoff teams, it shows like, okay, let's not take it easy at the end of the season. Like our spot isn't secured, so it makes them definitely want to play harder towards the end of the season. And regardless if it's a bubble or not, we're going to see great games at the NBA at the end of the season. Yeah, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Tyson says on the comments, should the Kings target Drew Holiday, or just to put the question out there, should the Nets, should the Lakers, should a lot of teams target Drew Holiday? And the answer is yes. He's a hell of a basketball player, but what do you want to give up? And we all know that the Pelicans are gonna ask for a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have a hot take here. I don't think New Orleans should trade Drew Holiday. I don't care about his age or whatever. Like He's known around the league as one of the best defenders. I think he's super underrated. If I'm New Orleans, hot take, I'm trading Lonzo and I'm making Drew Holiday my starting point guard because we've seen, the inconsistency out of Lonzo Ball. Don't get me wrong, he's great in transition, but if you are a point guard in the NBA and you can't shoot over 60% from the free throw line, I don't know if I'm trusting that jumper. So, I mean, for me, I would definitely keep him if I was New Orleans, but I think he's definitely a very valuable asset. I've heard, Brooklyn, Miami, and things like that. I think he can bring a lot to the table for any of those teams. I think particularly Miami is pretty enticing, considering that I think Goran Dragic's contract's up this year, right? So I personally think that Drew Holiday's a better player than Goran Dragic. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a playoff contending team and you're able to get a guy that can guard one, twos, and even some people would argue wings, as Drew Holiday is such a great
Oh,
defender,
for
I
sure.
think he
He's
makes
that good.
yeah, he makes any team better for sure.
If you're the Nets, do you give up LeVert for Drew Holiday?
I think at the points they are both at in their career, it makes more sense for Brooklyn to take Drew Holiday, just because I feel like we got to see a little bit of Karis LeVert, even though KD wasn't there this season. And I think, you don't want to minimize his potential. And I think, he would definitely flourish more in a young market, just like, New Orleans. But yeah, I would definitely take Drew Holiday over him.
Would you give up Dinwiddie and LeVert for Drew Holiday?
I mean, now that's tough because Dinwiddie is, this super big point guard and he's able to get the job done. In my opinion, I wouldn't just because those can be very valuable assets off the bench. But it's more so a matter of like if Levert and Dinwiddie. So in my opinion, I wouldn't give away both players just because they're so good. But I definitely give up Levert straight up for Drew Holiday.
Perfect. Someone says Buddy to the Lakers. And the only way that happens is obviously Danny Green and then Kyle Kuzma. But if that's the case, do you say yes to that? I'd say no to that because I'm not a huge fan of Kuzma and Danny Green. But you could see the upside if you erase this past season for Kuzma. So, what do you think about that?
So, contrary to popular belief, I'm actually pretty high on Kuzma just based on the fact that prior to last season, he was
Hmm.
arguably in the same conversation as Jason Tatum in terms of, being a great small forward and being a great scoring player. I think if you look at the Kings organization and what we have right now with Buddy Hield, I mean, he was able to do so much this past season, but especially with a disgruntled, player that's, liking other Instagram posts about, potentially going to Philadelphia or whatever. I'm just, as a Kings fan, it's like, dude, I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. If you don't want to be here, like we've already given you the money, and you just, kind of. I feel like in his sense, his agent was probably just like take the contract. If it doesn't work out, then just, request a trade. But I mean, I don't love Danny Green either. I think he was literally a
Yep.
walking brick. I think, you can arguably, say that between Danny Green and Paul George, it was Brick City over there. But I'm actually pretty high on Kyle Kuzma. And if you look at how he would fit in the Kings system, I mean, other than De'Aaron Fox, like who's taking shots away from Kuzma, Although he definitely has some inefficiency that we've seen over the past couple of seasons, I think, especially in a market like Sacramento, if he really does buy into the system, I can see success there. And so, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to taking a swing at Danny Green and Kyle Kuzma. I mean, if we could substitute Danny Green, I honestly might prefer Caruso, so like a Caruso
Oh,
Kyle
hell yeah.
Kuzma.
For
Yeah.
sure.
What are your thoughts?
But the problem is he don't make Danny Green's money, so it'd be hard for them to match the same salary. That's where, okay, if you want to throw in Caruso, Green, and Kuz, and I'm like, and then we can add Kojo to that.
Yeah.
Well, Kojo makes way too much money. Never mind. So I have to double check on how much Caruso makes, but if they add Caruso to that with Danny Green, and then somehow you can maybe flip Danny Green to somebody else, I would prefer that.
Definitely. And I
Someone
think some
said, would are we all sleeping on Cole Anthony? At what pick is he a no-brainer, even with De'Aaron Fox?
Cole Anthony. I'm gonna
I'm
be
not.
honest. Go. You can go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm not a big fan of Cole Anthony,
Yeah,
so I think at no point would I draft him.
me neither. I think you look at that draft class. I mean, If you want a point guard, trade up, get a Tyrese Halliburton, get a Kyra Lewis,
I think
get
RJ Hampton's better than Cole Anthony.
yeah,
I think RJ Hampton's gonna be a really good player.
yeah. I mean, some Kings fans even want Tyrese Maxey, right? So I
Right.
mean, I don't think Cole Anthony really has the intangibles to really be a great NBA player. I think that's the reason why he's been slipping in a lot of mock drafts. And I think that, I don't know, I've got to see him play a lot in like high school, especially like playing in New York, playing at Oak Hill Academy. And it was just nothing exciting for me. I think, what is he, 6'2"? He's technically like an undersized point guard. And it's just like, what can you really do to make a team better unless you're shooting lights out like Steph Curry or Trey Young? And obviously he doesn't have that trait. So,
Yeah. What'd you say before I cut you off?
oh, I was basically going to talk about DeMar DeRozan because you brought
Okay.
up Danny Green and Kyle Kuzma. People are saying that, that's a potential trade package to San Antonio. What are your thoughts on DeMar DeRozan pairing us alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis?
Is he that much? It's tough because you talk about Danny Green breaking things. They need a Buddy Hield type player there. Buddy'd be the perfect fit. The problem is for the Kings, again, it takes two to tango. What are you giving up? So with that said, does DeMar DeRozan fill in that void and much more than that? And the answer to me is no. He's not that shooter that you'd really like. He needs the ball in his hands, or unless you put him in that dunker spot role like a Ben Simmons. It's tough, man. I just don't think that fit makes sense. That's me though.
So you wouldn't give up Kyle Kuzma and Danny Green for DeMar DeRozan?
No, because then
I
you're
just
hampered.
I just think considering Danny Green's and Kyle Kuzma's performance in the playoff in the bubble, especially, it was really like underperforming, right? And if anything, Contavious Caldwell Pope and Rajon Rondo were definitely like the more valuable role
Oh, for
players
sure,
in that
for sure.
roster. So I don't know. I think if you kind of consider an aging LeBron, and
What's his contract situation like for DeMar DeRozan? Is
I
he a
don't know.
free
I just know
agent?
he has that player
Is
option.
is he a free agent after the season? So say he plays 1 year with the Lakers, would he be a free agent? Because if
I
that's the case, then obviously you say yes. But if
Yeah.
it's not the case and he has an extra year, then I would say no.
Yeah, I mean, I could just see DeMar DeRozan being that playmaker, and if you want to look long term for the Lakers, obviously LeBron isn't going to be able to play, 10 plus years, like everyone thinks. At this point, we don't know how much longer LeBron's going to play. He's a freaking, he must have sold his soul to the devil or something because
Yeah,
he's playing
facts.
insane, especially at his age. But yeah, I think if DeMar DeRozan, obviously they would kind of like want a better shooter, but just like you said, if they're able to fit him in a Ben Simmons role, I could see LeBron averaging like 15 plus assists because when you got DeMar on one side and Anthony Davis on one side, I feel like it's just dime city.
Okay. Um, some of the other questions is, would you trade Bogey and Barnes to the Bucks?
For what? That's the question I keep asking. For what? Like DiVincenzo? Like I don't want DiVincenzo. I
Okay.
mean, like at the end of the day,
For
like
Eric
even
Bledsoe, DiVincenzo in the first round pick.
like I mean, I was able to see your post, and
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that Eric Bledsoe could play well alongside De'Aaron Fox, but I think it would kind of be something similar to his early Clipper days, where his ceiling is only so high because playing alongside a Chris Paul in this case would be De'Aaron Fox. I don't know if a 2 point guard tandem really gets the job done.
He'd be a
I
six man for sure.
Yeah, and I think that
Kind of
you're
like
getting
a Dennis Schroeder type role.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And you're giving up Bogdanovic and Barnes, and I think, although I think Bogdanovic has played really well, although Barnes has underperformed, it's like I don't know if taking on a Bledsoe and
Yeah.
DiVincenzo makes us that much better. What are your thoughts?
It's tough. I think it makes perfect sense for the Bucks, but does it make
Yeah,
perfect sense for
definitely.
the Kings? That's
Yeah.
the question we must all ask ourselves. And if I had gun to my head, I'd say no. But like I said, if they somehow made that happen, the Bucks would win the championship. I mean, you add Harrison Barnes as a fourth option, and then Bogey there. Look at how tall that lineup is. Well, Bogey at the point, Giannis, Chris Middleton, Harrison Barnes, and Lopez. My gosh.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense for Milwaukee. I think, they're not arguing, they've definitely gotten better. And if they are even able to like finagle a Chris Paul to that,
Oh my gosh.
man, that's insane.
Oh my gosh. So what's the next topic?
So I think we can definitely talk about the 2020 NBA kind of like free agents this year. I think like we have the top 10 here. I think I'm just probably gonna it'd probably be best if I just throw out the name and you go and you just I think it'd be fun to kind of like have a hot take and just give me where you think they're gonna land. So what are your thoughts? Is that cool with you?
Go ahead.
All right, Anthony Davis. I think we know this one.
Stays.
Says Fred Van Vliet.
Phoenix is a perfect place for him.
And did you see the JJ Redick podcast? He said he's chasing the bag. He already won his chip. He wants the money.
Okay, perfect. So Phoenix makes sense. Atlanta to me makes sense. Playing next to Trey Young. Sacramento makes sense, but the Kings won't be able to pay him. The Suns, I don't think will either. So from all the teams that will pay him, the Pistons could pay him a lot of money. The Pistons, the Hornets, and the Hawks, I think, have all the money. So yeah, it just depends. He's definitely, if he said that, which I didn't hear about it, then for sure, then he's gone.
He made it very clear that in that podcast what he was looking for was the money basically,
Okay.
especially with the chip under his belt. So if you were a betting man, Leo, where does Fred Van Vliet play next season?
Oh man. Does the Raptors being a very smart organization do a sign and trade, right?
Ooh, that's
So if
interesting.
that happens, because they don't want to lose him for nothing. So that's what I would do, and I think that's what they probably would do if they were going to lose him. But then if you're the other team, you're like, well, I don't want to give up any assets. I just want to sign him. It's going to be a nice war to see. But if I had to predict a team, man, it's tough because Chris Paul makes sense too, but Van Vliet makes perfect sense. Perfect sense for the Suns. I'd say the Suns.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I think with me, I'm gonna go with the Raptors bite the bullet, end up paying him,
Okay.
especially I think Van Vliet's a better player than Brogdon, but I think you got to see that with Milwaukee how much they miss Brogdon, especially in the playoffs. So I don't think Toronto wants to.
Is he though?
I mean, I think Van Vliet. You don't think Van Vliet's a better player than Brogdon?
He kind of looks like me, but I have to admit, Brog and he plays like me, but like Brogdon's better, bro. He's
Ooh, I
he's
think. Hey,
bigger.
leave in the comments who you think's better, Fran Van
He
Vliet or Malcolm Brogdon.
that's interesting though for
Yeah.
sure. But Brogdon's bigger, better defender. Even though Leo Van Vliet is a good defender, uh, I don't know, man. I think Malcolm's a better player.
Really, I think yeah. I mean, Beverly's definitely a little bit smaller, right? Not a little
Yeah,
bit, a lot of bit smaller. But I mean, he's a scoring machine. I think when he gets hot
he
from
a
the 3 point,
dog for sure. But I'm just saying, I like Malcolm more.
yeah, for sure. So on to the next free agent. We got Christian Wood at 3. Where do you see him playing next season?
Oof. A lot of teams are gonna want him, and the Knicks are that team in terms of giving up the money. I see him playing with the Knicks.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat as you. I think they're gonna overpay for him, and I
Yep.
don't know if that pairing with Mitchell Robinson is gonna work very well. But they're the Knicks, so
They have to trade Mitch Robinson. They have to
that is just what they do.
trade him to the Kings.
Hey, I'm down. I'm all for it.
Trade him
Would-
to the Kings.
Let me ask you this: would you rather have Christian Wood or Rashawn Holmes?
Oh my God, I would rather have both of them together. I
Yeah,
think both of those guys together. What it doesn't matter who starts, and they both split the time. 25 and 25 or whatever. That would be an amazing tandem. Guys with so much energy. They're going to rebound, block shots, be a great pick and roll player with whoever plays with them. Bro, that is exactly what I would do and what I would love to see is both those guys playing together.
but who do you think's better?
Offensively, Christian, and defensively, Rashawn. But who's better? Ah, it's tough, man. I would say Rashawn's a little bit better.
All right, that's fair. Would you trade Marvin Bagley for Christian Wood?
Mm. So, since he is a free agent, it's just like straight up.
Well, like, I think hypothetically we'd have to add like somebody else to make the contracts work out, but that those would basically be the key pieces.
Yes, I would.
Yeah, I think if you look at a Kings perspective, like we want Marvin Bagley to turn into Christian Wood, so like why not take a sure thing over an unsure
Yeah, I
thing?
mean, Christian was a very good player already, and I know it's a small sample size, and people throw that in my face, but I'm like, just watch him play, and tell me that that's not sustainable.
Yeah,
Like to me, 15 and 10 is sustainable for him all
yeah,
year long. If you give him
and,
20, if you give this man 25 minutes a night, he'll get you 15 and 10.
and that's exactly what we've needed thus far out of
Yeah,
Marvin Bagley, and he just can't stay on the floor, so it
that's
is
all you need from that position.
definitely. At four, Brandon Ingram. I think this is pretty obvious. He stays in New Orleans, right? I don't think there's much
Stays.
debate there. Davis Bertans, nice little shooter.
Fucking guy is an amazing shooter. Amazing shooter. Damn. What are the Wizards thinking? I have no idea. That's the one team I haven't really thought about much. What are they going to do with Bradley Beal, with Bertans, with John Wall? Do they run it back with John Wall coming back at 110 supposedly? Bro, that's a team that I really, really have not thought about. And they have some interesting pieces. They got Rui over there as well. I don't know, man. Are they willing to overpay for Bertans? He's arguably a top five shooter for sure. Um, I think he goes, but the question is, are they willing to pay for his value, right? Just like a Joe Harris, Buddy Hield, Duncan Robinson, Bertans. These are all guys that are in the same spectrum of elite shooting.
Yeah. So what do you think he like? You think he stays in Washington?
Mm, no, but I just can't think of another team that he'll go to.
Hot take. I think he goes to Miami. They add another great shooter to that
Dude,
roster.
that'd be so unfair. That'd be so unfair if that happens.
Yeah,
I-
imagine them like playing small ball with Bertans. That'd be crazy.
If he goes to the Lakers, to the Clippers, that'd be crazy too.
So at six, we have Bogdan Bogdanovic. Where do you think he plays next season?
The Kings.
I'm hoping that he plays the Kings, but I guess to stir the pot a little bit and have a hot take, I think he somehow finds a way to Milwaukee. I don't know
Oof.
how, but let's hope that he stays in Sacramento.
So, do you want that pick? What is it, 24?
No, I definitely don't want it, but I think, yeah, I don't know how it would happen, but I mean, I don't know what
Do you
Monty McNair.
replace him at 24 with like the kid from TCU?
I mean, I feel like I've said this a million times. Like, I don't really love this draft class unless you're like in top three, really, and then top 10. So, I mean, do you find that late first round pick being able to turn into a Bogdanovich or fill that role of Harrison Barnes? I don't know. What do you think?
Tough. It's
Right.
tough. Yeah.
So, at seven, Malik Beasley of Minnesota,
That's
restricted free
interesting.
agent.
That's interesting. Uh, he's he's going through some trouble outside of
Yes.
the court, outside of basketball. So I don't know what happens. I don't know how severe it is. I think he goes, but he's probably going to Charlotte.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
actually pretty interesting. I think Charlotte definitely has the money and is willing to pay a little bit more than Minnesota is, considering they're
yep.
probably going to bring in Anthony Edwards, who plays the same position. But yeah, I don't really have a really destination in mind. I know he's dealing with a lot of
Malik
off
to
the court
jail.
stuff right now.
Malik to jail.
Malik to jail. I'm done. Malik.
He also says Van Vliet to the Heat and Bertans to the Spurs.
Oh, Berton, didn't he start his career in San
Yeah,
Antonio?
so he's going back to the Spurs.
Gotcha. At eight, Danilo Gallinari.
Ooh, Danilo Gallinari is going to the Lakers.
Lakers. Really?
If
Wow,
he
that's
goes to the
interesting.
Lakers, that's gonna be dangerous, bro.
Yeah, I don't know too much of like the cap space for most teams, but I feel like,
I think he does a 1 year, $5 to $10 million contract for the Lakers. Only for the Lakers.
the mid-level exception. I could
Yep.
definitely see that. At nine, I mean, this isn't too exciting of a free agent. Derek Jones Jr.
The Kings.
The Kings. I mean, I feel like he's gonna end up in like kind of like a mid-tier organization, like a Charlotte and Detroit, and
Yep.
then I feel like his career is gonna end there because
Yep.
like that's just that's what it is. Especially as like high flying player, that's all that they can really contribute.
Facts.
And that's
Um,
go ahead.
let me see. Yeah, so some of these questions we kind of went over. I think someone ESPN mock draft says if we getting Hayes, if we do have that, does that mean we moving Fox? First of all, Killian Hayes ain't dropping a 12. So no, that's not happening.
And if Killian Hayes is dropping to 12, I'm not trading Fox in any which way
No.
to fill a
No.
role, to fill him into that role.
I'm playing him with Fox.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if he falls to 12, hypothetically.
Yeah. I mean, if why not again? Why would you make the same mistake of not drafting Luca because you think you have Fox? No, you draft the best player available when you're a bad team, and the Kings are a bad team. Period. Period.
Definitely.
Um, thoughts on Aaron Gordon to the Bucks?
Ooh.
And that's from I am Jason from Basketball Zone.
I love that for the Bucks. I mean, Eric Gordon has kind of always been like that Swiss Army knife where he's like, okay, I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna play defense, I'm gonna knock down threes. I don't know if you saw like all the former and current Rockets players basically thrashing the Rockets organization. I thought it was kind of funny how Trevor Ariza decides to. I don't know if you heard about that. He wanted an apology from the Rockets to re-sign there, and he just never got it. So I think he can definitely flourish in an organization like Milwaukee. I think kind of like that Wesley Matthews role, right? And so, yeah, I definitely love it for Milwaukee. What are your thoughts?
I like it. I like it, but at what expense? What do they
Yeah,
want to give up for AG? It's interesting. Will the Spurs trade DeRozan or Aldridge? Go ahead.
I think they get rid of. Um, I think they get rid of DeRozan first, just
Okay.
because he's been so disgruntled in the media so publicly. So, yeah. What
Okay.
about you? What do you think?
I think they trade Aldridge, but who is willing to take on Aldridge at this stage of his career?
Yeah,
But maybe they'll find a way if they take on a bad contract or if they give up, if they attach, say, a first round pick, a late first round pick to that. Maybe a team like a Golden State may take a flyer, but definitely not giving up their number 2 pick. And people have even thrown the idea of trading the number 2 pick for Drew Holiday. I'm like, I love Drew, but that number 2 pick can be a star.
yeah,
So I love Drew. I love me some Drew Holiday, but I don't know for number 2, bro.
yeah. Not for number two, but I do. Yeah, Drew Holiday is definitely a great player.
What's
Do
the
you
next topic?
Do you think so? Now we're going to go over player options expected to be picked up, but I think these are also very interesting. Gordon Hayward,
Ugh. They'll pick it up, but they'll trade him.
where?
Hmm. To the
Let me
Pacers.
to who?
To the Pacers.
Pacers, yeah, same boat as you. I think he needs an organization like a Utah, right, where he can be the kind of like the playmaker on that team to really flourish.
Or to the
Like,
Kings. They'll trade him for Buddy Hield.
oh, I'm not opposed to that. Bring Gordon
Yeah.
Hayward to Sacramento. Next on the list, we got Mike Conley.
Oof. God, the Jazz are in a tough predicament. They just gave Spida the extension, which he deserved. Then Gobert's just coming up. They're they're like in the middle of we're a great team and we're a playoff team, but we can't get past first round or second round at that. What do they do to retool and maybe get something out of it? I think they pick it up though because they're under new ownership. Who they the team just got sold privately. I think they keep him and they just play it out. They run it back with hopefully Boyan, a healthy Boyan, who was a big factor of the Nuggets making it that far. If
Huge.
if Boyan, bro, if Boyan plays that series, the Jazz win that series. I want people to know that.
Yeah, or he can come to Sacramento too, and we have both Bogdanovic's. Who
Or
cares?
that. Or that.
Yeah, I think I don't know, man. I didn't love Mike Conley's bubble performance. I think especially in that game seven where, he launched that game winner. Like prior to that, he was
Uh-huh.
just missing so many shots. And I didn't see Memphis Mike Conley like we've seen in the past, like the underrated durable superstar.
Hmm.
Um, I thought that, although Mike obviously he plays a different game than Drew Holiday, kind of like that veteran presence that's able to, get the job done even later in his career. And I don't know. I just saw a lot of decline out of Mike Conley. So although I do expect him to pick it up because it's a player option, I mean, in terms of Utah, I don't know if that's really their point guard of the future.
The
Next on the list,
The Bucks have shown interest in Robert Covington, Patty Mills, PJ Tucker. Do any of those move the needle for you?
I think Robert Covington does. I think Robert Covington is very
Facts.
underrated. And I think that,
Facts.
you could argue he was the second most important player on that Rockets team
Big
outside of James
facts.
Harden, right?
Yeah, for
He
sure.
played incredible defense. I think the majority of the time, even if they played zone, if they ever, I think he was guarding LeBron a lot of the time. Like he's always guarding the best player. Quick little tidbit. He was actually at one of my high school basketball games my senior year, which is really random. I don't know if you're familiar with Monterey Trails, but I guess he
Yeah.
knew the head coach at Monterey Trails High School, so he was at the game. But
Wow.
yeah, Robert Covington, very underrated. And I think that he can bring a lot to Milwaukee. What about you?
I think that'd be a phenomenal fit. He'd be so good with Chris Middleton and Giannis and Brook Lopez. How do they make that happen? If I'm the Clippers, sorry, if I'm the Rockets, after I gave up on Clint Capella and a first round pick, I get the number 24 pick, and then I get Dante DiVincenzo. And I think that works out for both teams, right? You get your pick back at number 24, you draft a good player there, and you get a nice prospect in Dante, which, again, the Rockets are a mess. A lot of guys have spoken out, like you said, Austin Rivers and all these PJ Tucker, they're all unhappy. So they make that happen, man. They bring Covington to the Bucks, and they get closer to their goal, which is to keep Giannis and win the NBA championship.
Definitely. And I think the last person to kind of round out the player options expected to be picked up, Andre Drummond. I think he obviously does pick it up because I don't think any team's willing to offer him that money. But where could you
Facts.
see him playing next year if he doesn't end up staying in Cleveland?
The Celtics is probably the obvious. So going to the Celtics, and obviously he's picking that up. Ain't nobody gonna pay him that type of money. Someone said Conley to the Lakers.
Ooh. I'm gonna be honest. I think at this point in their career, Rondo fits better and can bring a lot more to that Lakers roster instead of Mike Conley. What do you think?
Yeah, if it's his version that we saw from Conley, which wasn't very impressive, it wasn't very impressive. I have to admit it. Then yeah, Rondo. But if we get like the Conley with the Grizzlies like that last year, then I'll take Conley. It's just
Yeah.
that he just couldn't find his stroke this year, which was really weird to me.
Yeah, like he's always been that player that's able to knock down floaters, kind of like
Right.
the kind of like a Kyrie Irving where he's able to like be nifty around the rim. And it's just we didn't see none of that. He couldn't even make open threes. So I mean, if you can't do any of those things, what do you really bring to a team?
Right.
I think yeah, kind of like to talk about your last point. Do you think the Rockets should have kept Clint Capella?
Over
Can they get
Covington? No. I think Covington's better.
I think if they were to assemble it in a way where they were able to acquire a wing, obviously not of the magnitude of Robert Covington, and keep Capella, I don't know. I really liked Capella in Houston, and just like that stat I told you earlier, I think they're like 60 and 2, 50 and 2 when Chris Paul, James Harden, and Clint Capella all played together on the floor, at least at some point in the game. So, I mean,
You
I
said
think
Chris Paul?
yeah, like back then when it
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
Chris
yeah, for
Paul, James
sure.
Harden, Capella,
That
yeah.
made sense because Chris Paul is such a great pick and roll player. But yeah, I with Russell Westbrook and Clint Capella,
Yeah, no,
that's the reason why they couldn't make it happen. So they had to move
gotta get
on.
him out.
What about Chris Paul to the Sixers?
So they would the Sixers give up Ben Simmons for Chris Paul and say
Uh
let's win it now, right?
do they though?
I mean, what else would they give up? Josh Richardson or do you want Tobias Harris, Al Horford? You want to go that route in terms of I don't know if OKC wants big contracts considering that they have a million first round picks. So I
Okay,
mean,
so
I
maybe
do
Al
think that
Horford. more first round picks to match Chris Paul. That's tough, huh? Yeah.
Because then, I mean, if you're able to keep Ben Simmons for sure, if you give up everybody else but Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and you have that trio, that's insane. You can find some serviceable wing, and you just like you mentioned, like if you're able to bring in like a Gallinari, bam, there you go, you're set, you're chilling. But yeah, I don't know if I would love giving up Ben Simmons straight up for CP3, especially at the point of he is in
Yeah.
his career. It'd be like a one swing, and hopefully we can get the job done. I would much prefer James Harden for Ben
Oh,
Simmons.
for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Ibaka to the Nets or to the Lakers?
I've heard a lot of Ibaka to the Lakers, and I mean this is kind of like under the radar stuff, but like Tristan Thompson's been definitely like hanging out with LeBron a lot. So I think hearing that Dwight Howard might end up in Golden State if Golden State ends up trading that number 2 pick and not taking James Wiseman. I mean, I think the question comes down to would you as a Lakers organization, would you rather have Tristan Thompson or Serge Ibaka?
Serge Ibaka for sure. Because
I,
Serge can spread the floor out for you.
I think I don't know. Serge Ibaka's a little bit older. I think we've
For
definitely
sure.
seen his play decline. Do I love Tristan Thompson in terms of what else he can bring? Like obviously he rebounds and block shots, but like that's what every kind of big does. Yeah, I think it's definitely Ibaka, especially if it's just kind of like a 1 year rental and just
Yep.
like make it to the championship again. But I mean, if they're able to bring both of them on, why not?
All right. LaMelo Ball. Out of these three teams, who do you think will move up and draft him? The Pistons, the Bulls, or the Thunder?
I think the Bulls take him. I think the Bulls like him too much. Um, was it? I don't know if a report came out that the Bulls liked Markkanen more than Wendell Carter. Some,
Wow.
yeah, something like that came out where they like that. That's what they just blatantly said. So, I mean, would you be willing to give up four and Wendell to go up to two and maybe even another piece from Golden State, maybe like an Eric Pascal. You know what I mean? Like that's interesting. But yeah, I think Chicago does it. I
Mm,
think Chicago just kind of like,
yes. If they, pretty simple. If they give up Marketing or Wendell facts to the Warriors,
yeah, because they need a
it's a
big.
no brainer for the Warriors.
Yeah, Carter,
That's
Carter.
interesting. I haven't really thought about it like that. But if they're willing to give up, I'm like, and the Warriors, I only move back 2 spots, and then I still get the guy that I want, which could be Denny at 4.
Bam, Denny and Wendell
Oh
on
my
that Golden State
gosh,
team.
you're just making the richer rich, or the
Yeah.
yeah.
And then would you argue it's a win-win? Because Chicago now gets their star in LaMelo Ball, and they also get like an Eric Pascal, which isn't bad.
You know what? I haven't really thought about it that way, but that's a win-win. That's the
Yeah.
first win-win we've had in a while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hey, maybe we have to go more of these Chicago trade
Yeah,
projections because same
there's
thing with the
always
Kobe White.
something that
That was
surfaces in
interesting.
our brains.
Yeah, for sure.
That's pretty much it, huh? I mean, I think we've covered on most rumors. We've gone for an hour and 7 minutes. Um, anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think that's basically it. Yeah, I was able to get all the topics in that we discussed prior.
So the NBA draft is right around the corner. What's today? The 20? Sorry, the 20th. They're the 12th. The draft is next Wednesday or next Thursday.
I'm not
Is it the
sure.
19th or 18th? I forget.
It is the. Let me check really quickly. The draft is on the 18th, so that
So
is
next
next
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
So next Wednesday we have the draft. Maybe what people would like to see from you, Ty, is you making short videos. Record it with your phone and then make it into a box the way you've been doing it. Talking about the top 14 guys from here on out. So from here on out, you give kind of your brief summary of the player, what you think of them, strengths and weaknesses in under a minute, and we'll post that throughout the week. And then you'll
Gotcha.
give us your ultimate Kings pick at 12 if they stay at 12. Because if
For
they can
sure.
get Denny Avia, then I'd go for that too.
All right, cool. Sounds good. We can definitely like discuss more details off the podcast. But yeah, that's super exciting. I'm super down for player comparisons as well. I think that would be really cool.
Perfect, man. So that's going to do it, y'all. This will probably be the last podcast of the week since it's a Thursday, and I'll be back in Arizona tomorrow night, continuing to work on this documentary. The name of the documentary is Unconstitutional, so it's going to be political. It's going to be a big one. It's going to drain a lot of my life the next couple of weeks, but we'll do our best to continue to provide big time coverage as we've done every single year since I've taken over in 2015. It's going to be a hefty next month because of draft, NBA free agency, and then the season's going to start. So definitely shout out to Ty for really contributing in a big way. Shout out to Corey as well for making the graphics as soon as possible. Love the squad. We'll be back, y'all, next week. I'll be back Monday night and maybe a Tuesday or, yeah, for sure a Tuesday podcast to kind of give our last thoughts before the NBA draft. And then the day of the draft, do like even like a live, I would say, like a live podcast during the draft or even right after.
Yeah.
So book it on your calendars, y'all. Tuesday, Wednesday next week. But throughout the week, we'll be surfacing some content, some micro content for you guys in preparation, kind of like for this show and then in preparation for the following week. So, on behalf of the entire CK team, we'll see you guys on the next one.